Hi, everybody. We are at a special show today and doing something not in retail, not in hospitality, but talking about health devices and something I personally like, biohacking in a sense, and getting involved with a lot of technology there, hardware parts. I'm a big tech geek in that sense, a kind of Guinea pig approach on myself. And one of the devices I truly love and I use more or less daily is my Zendo meditation device. And of course, when you love a device and you're a hardware geek, you have to reach out to the founders and the guys who actually put that in the market. So it's my great pleasure to talk with Bashar and Baron today, who are the founders of Zendo. And they're both doctors, PhDs, and we will discuss about health devices and all kinds of stuff related to that today. And I hand over to you. Maybe do a short intro of yourself that the audience knows who you are and what they can get from their Zendo.
Great. So thank you so much, Joseph. And he's not kidding. He bought one. We didn't know each other before. He reached out to us. And we do these conversations with all of our users, whoever emails we talk to. And yeah, we've met Joseph and we've hit it off and become good friends. So I'm Bashar Badran. I'm a neuroscientist. I'm one of the co-founders of Zendo. I'm a professor of psychiatry at the Medical University of South Carolina, where I run a research lab that develops all sorts of new and innovative brain stimulation treatments and interventions to improve human health and wellness and performance. So we do things in newborn babies all the way up to older folks who've had a stroke. We've worked with NASA developing brain stimulation for future space travel. And Zendo is one of those interesting applications that we started working on 5 years ago and has now come to market. And so we're kind of developing it and selling it online in an e-commerce platform here in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'll hand it off to Dr. Baron Short, who's my co-founder.
Sure. Thanks again, Joseph. It's been great to get on the call with you guys and talk a little bit about ourselves and what we're up to, because we have a lot of passion and purpose into what we're doing. So I'm trained in internal medicine and psychiatry, and I am the medical director of a brain stimulation service at the Medical University of South Carolina. And so I treat a lot of people that have very treatment-resistant neuropsychiatric conditions and use a variety of brain stimulation technologies, mostly non-invasive things such as like transcranial magnetic stimulation or electroconvulsive therapy. Or we also have invasive types of therapies where people have vagus nerve stimulation and epidural cortical stimulation. So my day job is pretty heavy hitter for pretty serious conditions. And luckily we get to help a lot of people with those conditions. But my other passion is like wellness and human potential. So we'll talk more about this, but I have a 27-year meditation practice. I kind of think of the mind as the software of sorts. And so we can do things to change the brain directly through changing the brain, or we can change the mind to change the brain to change the mind. And that's essentially where Bashar and I kind of met up. I initially done some research as a resident physician with MRI, functional MRI, and imaging advanced meditators and what happens in their brain, and seeing how very common features occur, which would come back as Bashar and I got together and looking at neuroimaging, which we'll talk about. And I'd also done some work with brain stimulation and meditation, kind of dabbling. These are kind of like side projects, but it's still a real passion. And Bashar and I, Bashar was at that time, let's see, that was around 2015, was working on his PhD. He was, he's pioneering a lot of brain stimulation technologies this was one of his passions and interest, and at the time was not actively encouraged to pursue this work, but he knew I love to hack the mind and the brain, and we basically started experimenting with this technology on ourselves, and basically able. And I'll let Bashar talk a little more about the science of it and the path of it. But I remember, I've a lot of practices and different types of meditation, and including retreat experiences. And I remember the first time I ever used Zendo, I said, wow, in 20 minutes, I felt like I was in my third hour of a retreat setting. So I was like, we've got something that accelerates it. We need to study it. And then we'll talk more about that as we study it. We say, then we need to get this out here to the world. So.
Yeah, I think there are two dimensions in that, and the one thing is about, it's not software. So I mean, yes, you can have your Calm app, and you can listen to anything and do breathing, but the other part is it's not invasive, but it's a device. It's a hardware device which actually helps. We talked about REM handling, so eyes therapy. You have light therapy. You could have physical stimulation with a Theragun on a massage side. So those are all physical parts. So I think that's one thing. It's not only software. So I think that's very, very important to point out, that everybody can do an app in a sense, and you can push the app and you can scale it. But having a medical device actually with a consumer and having the consumer use it to perform a certain task, I think that's one dimension. And I think Baron can and Bashar can probably allude to that, what that means on the path doing that. And the other part that you also mentioned, Baron, was that yes, there are some parts in transcendental meditation and neurostimulation, and in the end, using a Zendo, for example, using this medical device, yes, you can go on a retreat and use frog blood or all kinds of illegal substances to get in certain states. But actually, when you can do it with a hardware that is safe and you can use at home and is legal, that's something different. So I think that's a very interesting point in all this biohacking discussions and in medical devices. It's a hardware, and the other part, and it's safe and it's legal. It gives you a way to use that features which otherwise you can only have in a closed hospital environment. But you don't have to trust a shaman or like a guy in the woods, and you have to think, oh, maybe I it's the wrong mushroom, yeah. So maybe you can allude to those two points, and maybe first the hardware side, because that's a hard job. Yeah. Not everybody's jumping out of the seat and say, yes, I have to do a hardware device now.
Yeah, I mean, hardware is really hard. But without hardware, you really can't interact with the brain or the body, right? Just using software alone cannot change human behavior, or at least strongly enough to have an immediate effect that's durable, that people would want to utilize daily or semi-regularly. So Zendo fits this interesting niche where we're not truly a medical device. Medical devices go through a US FDA approval process to treat specific disorders. Zendo is really one of the first devices that's pioneering this health and wellness space, where we're using technology that is made to medical device standards. So made in the same factories, made to the same certifications, made to the same safety and regulatory spec. But they're not used to treat, say, depression. They're used to reduce stress and improve your meditation experience. And these effects are quite profound. So, using a device like Zendo improves the efficiency of your meditation 250%. So if you take people who meditate with just an app with fake stimulation, and you take people who meditate with the same app but use Zendo, their effects in feeling more calm, less restless, and more mindful are 250% increased compared to the placebo. So we did all
At
the
least,
science.
at least, so I can say a person at least.
At least.
I feel it's more. Yeah?
Totally. So I would say it's, anecdotally probably like a 9x improvement. But in the data, and we're scientists and doctors first. In the data, we showed in double blind. So we didn't know what conditions folks were receiving, and they didn't know whether they were receiving real stimulation or fake stimulation. And the users couldn't tell either. There is a 250% increase. And just since we're starting off, I have one of the Zendos here so that people are oriented with what we're talking about. So Zendo comes in this pretty cool case, hard shell case, and when you open it, it's really as simple as something that can fit in the palm of your hand that you could turn on with one button. And it has intentionally minimal interactions that you could do with it. All Zendo sessions are preset to 20 minutes. There's 3 modes, 1, 2, and 3, and start. And it's as simple as really plugging in your wire at the top of your Zendo and then connecting to a pads, because we need a way for the electrical stimulation to interface with your brain through the scalp. So what we have are these Zendo pads. They're pretty cool. They're designed by us, manufactured by us, and they have a kind of a nice fabric feel. And what you do is just snap on the wires and peel the pad off, and then place it over your left eye and over your right temple. And then you kind of hold it in place for about 5 seconds. It warms up pretty nicely. And because people have different size heads, we have this non-conductive part that allows for the expansion and contraction of the pads. And you're pretty much ready to go. You pick your mode, you hit start, stimulation turns on, and you meditate. And meditation can be a variety of things. It could be classically a meditation app, or it could be just sitting in front of the TV, being calm, relaxed with a cup of coffee. So it's really a moment in your day that you can give yourself permission to take a pause, put on a device, and feel really good after. So that's what we worked on. And the prototypes did not look as slick as this, but now we're at a really unique piece of hardware that works really well. And things like battery life are really long, which were important to the users, and intentionally decoupling you from technology. So this is one of those standalone hardware systems that has a purpose, and the purpose is to make you feel good and help your meditation. So we intentionally decoupled this from an app to control it and really make it a meditative experience within itself.
And I think that's a very important point, because in the end, the device that you have and this process is something that is also done in a professional sense. I mean, that's done in the clinic, not with the same pads, but in a similar setting. So neural stimulation is something that's done in your practices, and that's a home use. And if you link it with Calm, with an app, then you're very limited to a certain part. And I would say maybe it's a big part of privacy. Yes, Calm knows whenever I do meditation or when I do my daily Calm or some breathing exercise, but do I really want them to know what kind of brain stimulation I like? And that's very, I mean, Apple knows my heartbeats, but do I want to have my brain activity tracked as well? And maybe that's something you could cover on a professional side, that this is not something where you just said, let's put patches on the head and put some voltages on your head, but that's actually something that's used in clinical practice.
Yeah, so I'll hand it off to Baron, but just to tee him off, the brain is an electrochemical organ. if you're watching this and you only learned one thing and you want to go and share a bit of information with your friends, the brain's an electrochemical organ, meaning it could be activated by chemicals. So classical pharmacological interventions, so medicines, have effects on the brain. But you can also activate the brain using energy, so electricity, magnetism, or ultrasound. And those are non-invasive forms of energy that can be pushed through your scalp, through your skull, and then activate the underlying brain regions. And so those technologies are being used to help a lot of people all over the world. And I'll tee it off to Baron because that's what he does every day. And he helps a lot of people and he uses these technologies.
And they're legal. So I think that's a very important, it's one thing to take chemical compounds or mushrooms or frog blood, but the other part is using magnetism and electricity, which is legal.
Totally.
Indeed. So in my regular clinic hours, I'm using a variety of brain stimulation technologies that are brainstem heavy, mental effort light. So if we even take something like electroconvulsive therapy, which is actually done under anesthesia, in that moment there is no consciousness, right? So those are heavy hitters, and so you can take a lighter type of technology such as transcranial magnetic stimulation, where people are sitting in a chair while they're awake, receiving electromagnetic pulses, commonly to treat things like depression, OCD, and also smoking cessation. But they're generally still relatively low mental effort. And if we think back, where did even meditation come from? It's like people didn't like to suffer. They didn't like that life sometimes sucks or things happen the way they don't want to happen. And that they noticed they had a certain way of thinking and feeling and relating to this. And that at some point they realized they could change their way of thinking and relating to that, right? And in modern Western psychotherapies, there are heavy mental effort, usually talking about oneself and one's relationship to other people and things in the world, which is incredibly helpful. And some of the traditional meditation practices go kind of a level simpler, right? So if we go from people, places, things, and stories to kind of the phenomena of your experience, your thoughts arising moment to moment, feelings rising moment to moment, sensations rising moment to moment. Now, that's kind of old school meditation, and it's very powerful, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. You could sit down for 20 minutes and try to meditate, and you might not go anywhere. And in fact, you probably won't go anywhere. You could take a psilocybin mushroom and you're going to go somewhere, and it's unclear where you may go. You may go somewhere beautiful. You may have a great healing experience, or you might not, and this might not go well. And so that's a great point of this type of technology is trying to marry kind of lighter brain stimulation technology with that mental effort that there's a lot of work already been done and is still being done. And I would say we're at the very forefront or frontier of saying, how do we take these lighter type of brain stimulation technologies that are legal, that are safe, that you can go to work, you can go see your family or kids or friends, and applying the mental efforts that have been from the past, but also things we're creating now. And so I would say, our current kind of map of that, I call it kind of overall well-being, performance, and transformation. And so meditation in itself, and the way we kind of view it, the way I view it, is can be used for those three main domains, right? So people just want to be well. There are things we do like eat right, exercise, sleep well. But we can do meditation to get a little more calm or feel a little more loving, which is very powerful. Don't we need more of that in the world? If I could just give everyone a Zendo for free to work on their well-being, I would be all in. Like, sign me up, right? But it also can be used for performance, right? So people can say, I want to be able to concentrate better. I want to be able to work through my inner saboteur so that when I show up for the board meeting, like I'm confident in a authentic way and ready to go and ready to perform and fulfill purpose and meaning, right? And we have MLB baseball players using this type of work. We've got CEOs. We got the crew. We got the everyday man, woman, you name it. And then this last category, which is a little less common, is the transformation. And that's where people are literally, I would like to view it as upgrading their mind and upgrading their game of life. They're trying to say, how do I want to think, feel, relate, and behave in the world in a better way? How do I want to see myself in the deepest and furthest reaches? And so I would argue a technology like Zendo allows you to do all three of those, and it allows you to do it in a more graded way rather than, you're strapped to a rocket and let's see where you end up going, right? People can do this in a methodic way at their own pace and really, really transform their life. So I'm super stoked.
But Baron, that's an interesting point, because I actually not only used it for meditation in a let's say I have to lie down and sleep or go to sleep or really relax. I actually also used it rehearsing presentations or trying to remember stuff or doing really stuff where I need to concentrate. And actually it worked as well. What I found interesting is, how did you decide to say, let's use, you put it in a light way. How do you decide what is a voltage, or let's say a level of electricity that you can give to the common person? And what was the idea, not too high, not too little? Because on a device, if you do too much, maybe some people would overdo it, and if you do it too little, nobody would have a reaction. How was that? How did you manage that?
It's a good question. So the technology behind Zendo is called transcranial direct current stimulation, or TDCS for short. And I think it's the most lightweight form of neuromodulation that exists. So TDCS, historically in the literature, has been done in thousands of different studies. We're not the first people to use this type of technology. We are the first to do it in meditation. And normally, TDCS has been shown to be safe between 0 and 2 milliamps. So the voltage is variable voltage. This is a constant current stimulator, meaning, depending on the resistance of the electrodes and the skin, we will vary the voltage to maintain a specific milliamp current. So, there are people that can go up to 4 milliamps in terms of stimulation, but 2 milliamps is really for a generalizable at-home, piece of hardware. 2 milliamps seems to be the max that's comfortably tolerated for the skin, and is pretty much the max for most people's benefits. Now, you can go all the way to things like electroconvulsive therapy, which are actually used to treat folks with depression and catatonia. It's done in the hospital, and that has almost 1,000 times more current. You would never do that at home. You'd never do. You wouldn't. I don't think anyone's even considered it. It's needs a lot of special staff and supervision. Now, you can go somewhere in between, where you can deliver electromagnetism to the brain, which the magnetic field actually, with Faraday's law, induces an electrical current in the brain, and that actually activates neurons. Nobody does that at home either, because doing it too much or in the wrong place can cause seizures. So, it is potentially unsafe unless it's under strict medical supervision. But TDCS is so lightweight that a user can self-administer it at home without any negative side effects. Now, if you go too high, or your skin's a little more sensitive, you may get a little bit of a tingling, warm sensation, or a little bit of redness on your skin. And that's when you're kind of going a little bit too high for yourself. We let people start low at mode 1, go to mode 2, and then try mode 3. And from all of our data, 47% of users like mode 2. So if somebody was just using it one time, we'd say, hey, here, try it, go to mode 2, you're going to love it. But, there's this idea that more is not better when it comes to neuromodulation. So, if you're trying to speed in your car, you want to go all out on the gas straight and then look at the miles per hour or kilometers per hour just tick up, right? In the case with the brain, it actually doesn't work like that. There's active mechanisms that are trying to counteract what's happening. So it's like trying to speed in your car while slamming the brakes at the same time. So your brain's internal regulator is controlling that. So you can only push the healthy brain so far before the intrinsic opposite starts to occur. And so what we've seen is this idea that folks that really enjoy mode 1 and have really positive effects, mode 3 may be too high, and it actually starts to work against you. But in other folks, mode 3 is just right, and mode 1 doesn't work very well. Between all 3 modes, we've really covered the majority of the gamut. So, yeah, it's interesting. We've had a variety of people use it. So regular folks who are just meditators to professional baseball players. A lot of them are pitchers. And position players. One of them currently, Patrick Wisdom, is the hottest baseball player. He plays for the Chicago Cubs. You guys should go check him out. He's hitting home runs like crazy. So there's all sorts of people that are using it. And there's no really one size fits all. It's really up to the individual. It's up to the resting excitability in your brain, which we currently have no good way to measure. If we could measure that before, then we can say, okay, you're a mode 1 guy, you're a mode 3 girl. But right now we don't have that technology. It doesn't currently exist for at home. So, that's why, we let people self-select their modes, and it's a function of hardware optimization. So you are part of the hardware because the hardware is affecting you. That's kind of how Zendo works.
And maybe bridging a gap and looking at the hardware side again. So we are also doing a lot of hardware, but our luck, we're very lucky because we sell our hardware not to end consumers, but actually we sell B2B. So we sell to professionals, I would say professional organizations with large IT departments who really understand why they're buying our hardware with the special setup, and they also know how to use it. Whereas the user who in the end is in the McDonald's and selecting his stuff, he just wants a certain performance. He doesn't care what kind of PC is behind it, what kind of connection, what is the UL certification. They don't care about that. And what you mentioned is you did actually the hardest part because you went to the end user, but there's also a professional layer in between. And especially if we look at the health industry or health device. Whenever I was in the US in the last few years and in some gyms, I saw personal trainers, and whereas in the past the personal trainer had a short and a shirt, he had the Theragun sticking on one side, and he had some other parts on the other. So there was a lot of gadgets already on the more or less professional side, and this is also a trend that is picking up here in Europe, where those professionals or semi-professionals use certain devices to level up their game, and that would be something. If we look at the business model, because that's always our issue, to say, do you sell a device? What's your recurring part? You should have for those professionals some services, or is that something you're thinking about going in a professional direction and also offering how to use, let's say, certification? So if I know I go to this trainer, he has a gold level standard of Zendo, and I'm okay with him putting not 2 milliampere, but 40 milliampere into my brain.
So that's, you're spot on. Actually, so as you know, starting a company is hard, especially with hardware, right? We can't just code this thing in our office and then push it to all the users for free, right? So the first step was doing all the science. The second step was creating a prototype. The third step, which I think is one of the hardest steps in hardware, is finding manufacturers that you trust that can execute on your concept at a price point for a cost of goods that is reasonable to the end user, right? A good example is when we were looking for manufacturers, the first manufacturer said, oh yeah, we can make these, each system's gonna cost $375. Well, that's not really realistic for a meditation application. Maybe if it was a medical device being, used in the medical office, perhaps. But for that, that price point, there was no way you can actually create a hardware business, which is one of the challenges of hardware in itself, and so then we found a manufacturer that can go ahead and do it within our, ideal cost of goods, so that there's some sort of a margin, which, early hardware startups, you're not really making a margin. You're just trying to get users to prove your unique piece of hardware. So right now what we're doing is we're selling them pretty much at cost, so that and directly to consumers to see, one, do people like it, which people do. Are people open to doing this at home? Because it's so new and nothing like this really exists. It's a brand new segment, which I think will be a huge segment over the next decade. Are people open to it, and what's the feedback? So we do these non-scalable solutions currently, where whenever somebody buys one, we shoot them an email and we say, hey, your Zendo's on the way. Why don't we, if you want, we can get on a call with you and help you set it up. And those are really so we can learn what kind of users are buying these systems, what they're running into in terms of roadblocks, what they're looking for. And so we're almost done completing, this essentially public beta where you pay to access a Zendo, you use it, we get feedback, and we've collected all this data, so that now we have a kind of a two-phase future. One is this direct-to-consumer, where we will create a unique piece of equipment that's optimized for them based on all the things we've learned, but also offering professional services. So we're currently testing this B2B service type offering in a retail wellness center in the United States. They offer all sorts of services like cryotherapy and massage and float tank. And so Zendo will be used there, and they'll be buying the hardware plus the pads. And so, recurring revenue is something that's supported in hardware devices. And so these pads are one-time use only, and the retail center is trained by us to offer this as a service, where then they can charge their folks who come in to use their services a nominal fee. It looks to be about between $20 and $25 for a 20-minute session, and the margins are really good for them as a service provider. We also have other things that we're exploring, like partnering with meditation studios and retreat centers. And I think Baron can tell you a little bit about how we did a meditation retreat in Vermont, which is a state kind of in the northeastern part of the United States, where 35 people came to a 5-day silent retreat, and it was a Zendo retreat. So they received 2 Zendo sessions a day for 5 days, and they self-administered it. They paid $1,500 per person, and all of the money was donated back to the monastery. And Baron was there just to make sure everything went well, and it did. And we'll let him talk a little bit about it, which is also another interesting B2B play.
Yeah, maybe the recurring parts on the pads, and I think it's one thing to design the device, but actually, as far as I understood, you spend even more time on designing the pads because in the end, I'm putting it on my skin, and I really love how you did the pads, and they're holding on quite good, even if you have a lot of hair. So it even works if you have a lot of hair, and it doesn't feel bad on the skin. And I believe that was an even harder job in that sense to get the pads right, because that's the consumable, that's the one that's touching the consumer. So that's a tough one.
I mean, the pads was really hard. It took us almost a year to develop pads for two reasons. One, finding a manufacturer that makes electrodes to medical spec. There's only a few of them in the world, and most of them require really high minimum orders. So when you're a small startup trying to make it, having a 10,000 minimum monthly order is totally not reasonable, right? So we found someone who believed in us, believed in the mission, and essentially let us use time on their line to manufacture these for a pretty good deal, which is what we got it at the beginning. And in the first order, we ordered 20,000 pads, and the pads are actually silk screened silver. So essentially, they're flex circuits. So this whole thing is just a flexible electrode, which is amazing. Electrodes used to be either carbon or metal. They used to be thick and rigid, and now we have a piece of really thin plastic that can transmit electricity to your brain and kind of mold to your head. So that was the big one, was finding someone that could do it for us. And then the second big one was finding the right gel. So, biocompatible gels, there's a lot of them, and they're used in a variety of different applications. So if you go in and you have chest pain and you go into the doctor's office, they're going to stick these electrodes on your chest and then measure the electrical activity in your heart, right? I think that's the most common application that these gels are used in. But if you take those same gels and then try to stimulate your brain with them, they'll be so painful that you'll never want to put them on your head ever again. And so what we did was we tested all of the gels that we could, almost 50 different gels, and
we put them on our arms instead, right? Because they were so damn painful. Yeah,
you didn't all test them on the head.
No,
we couldn't. Yeah,
the ones that were barely kind of barely in the range of being comfortable, that I was like the tester, right? So we would be there, and Baron would just wait, and I'd put it on, and I'd do it, and I'd be like, we can't do that, right? And then we found the gel. And the gel is a specific gel. It's used in a really small application, and it works. So it's, hygienic. It's really for sensitive skin, and it has the chemical properties that allow you to transmit electricity through it for at least 20 minutes at a specific current. So a lot of these gels will have some labeling that suggests that you can actually administer stimulation, a specific current intensity over a specific amount of time. Some don't. And because, using these types of currents is not very common. The only, area that allows for, electricity through flexible pads is TENS. So musculoskeletal TENS systems do that. But we're talking about a different application. If you were to put TENS electrodes on your head and try to do TENS, it would be really painful. And I would actually suggest nobody ever tries that. So created these electrodes. We found a manufacturer that can do it all. So not only did we get we design all the pads in-house, and we have some pending IP on it. And then the manufacturer takes the CAD, puts it in their machine, and starts figuring out a way to do it. And our manufacturer is awesome. And they made it. They make the packaging. They're all QC'd there. They get sent to us. We QC secondarily. And it's been a wonderful process, but it's been long. And the early pads, were going really well. And so we had prototypes. And then Baron, part of the electrode process is getting people to use them before we even decide on them. So Baron took them to the retreat and then actually collected the data. Baron, if you want to talk about kind of collecting the data on usability and the pads, pretty interesting.
Yeah, and just briefly talk about that. Basically we were in Lowell, Vermont, and got to see no snow to snow and ice over the ponds. It was beautiful rural area, and to try to train 35 people to use a Zendo pad while the entire thing is a silent retreat, so they get to hear me talk. Matt, just think about that, right? So And the good news, I guess I did well enough, or they did well enough. Within about 3 sessions, there was no further modification needed, meaning these people were able to prep their skin appropriately, apply the pads, apply the system, turn it on, and start. And this was a prototype, actually 2. And so it was quite amazing to see how these folks were able to operationalize this very quickly. At the end of the retreat, over 75% of the people wanted to buy a device. We were not even selling at the time, and people were grabbing me by the shirt. I mean this literally. Meditators going, how do I get one of these? Because this so up-leveled my practice, right? So came back very stoked and very excited. So yeah, and I think, that does bear out of how do we replicate that, reproduce that? How does that lead to recurring benefit and recurring revenue? And so with COVID, it makes it a bit harder to have in-person retreats. And so there's more and more of this transition to virtual studios, virtual retreats. And so, that is part of our larger vision of kind of having these virtual studios, virtual retreats, where we could apply different types of practices based on people trying to enhance their well-being, performance, or transformation, and using Zendo and other devices that we have in our back pocket. But so
and you do that globally. So everybody listening on, it's not only the US, Germany, wherever you are. Baron and Bashar are sending it worldwide, and actually it works perfectly and in no time, and also for reordering of the pads. That's not an issue, which I personally also found interesting, because yes, you're a startup, but you already developed this product for quite some time, and the execution is really flawless for the state that you're in on that
Yeah,
side. So
thank you. The hardware also has logistics, right? So when you're a hardware company, you make a technology that doesn't exist. You find people to make it for you at a price that's able for you to have a business. Then you have to test it on all these folks to get feedback, and then you may go back to square one, right? And you do that for a while, and then you're like, all right, we're set. Now let's do the packaging, and let's figure out the logistics and fulfillment, and then figure out how we can quickly go to international, which we did really fast. And I'd say right now about 15% of our users have been international in Canada, in Germany, in Italy, in the UK. So there's been a lot of folks that are buying it internationally.
Great. No, I think so. So I think we covered all the topics. We had only one comment from Arne, who is saying it's very, very interesting, and thanks for sharing. So if anybody listening out there and you have some questions, specific questions for Baron and Bashar, now is the time. You can post them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm sure Baron and Bashar are happy if you first of all order your Zendo device today. That's one part, and on the other hand, reach out. I think you're in a investment round as well, so I think that's something to share as well. If you want to invest in a future technology, that's a good way to go. Otherwise, just enjoy the devices. And yeah, I'm so happy to use it, to be a user, and to have the personal connection there. And let's see what we can do on that end together. Yeah.
Awesome. I think you covered it all. It's really been a pleasure to be here and do this type of chat, and it's really fun. Me and Baron are outside of the company. We're colleagues. We're friends. We hang out with each other's families. And this has been a long journey. In a sense, it's something that, like Baron said, if we could just give it all away for free, we would, because we do believe in the technology being able to change the way people interact with each other and help their inner health. Unfortunately, we can't do that right now unless somebody out there wants to donate a lot of money and then make it a reality. So in the time being, we're actually trying to sell these mostly at cost and help out as many people as we can. So yeah, we are in the middle of an investment round. It's closing soon. If people are interested, we're happy to talk to them about it. And yeah, and thanks for having us. I'll hand it off to Baron.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. It's been awesome to be here with you, and I look forward to future conversations. Certainly, if you have any questions personally about Zendo, reach out to us, reach out to me. Part of that non-scalable process is I've been trying to talk with every person who buys a system and try to meet them where they're at and what they're after, right? And so it's been great to talk and engage in this way. And I am an idealist at heart, and I do genuinely believe we're going to do our part to make the world a better place. World certainly needs it, right? It needs us all of us at our best game, with our biggest heart and our sharpest mind, and to come out and make the world better. So happy to be a part of that and happy to be here. So thank you.
There could be no better final comments. I think that's the perfect ending. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
And hear you soon.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks,
Bye.
Joseph. Okay. Bye now.